This isn't a plate full of candy, it's a plate full of chocolate covered cherry cookies. You can see here we have a cherry cookie flavor and we've completely enrobed it in chocolate. This recipe yields 3½ dozen cookies, and the baking, cooling, and coating time is 2½ to 3 hours. That does not include the fact that the cookies need to dry overnight. And here's everything that we need to make the cherry cookie center that goes into our chocolate covered cherry cookies. We'll start with 1 cup, 2 sticks of unsalted margarine, 3/4 of a cup of powdered sugar, all of that, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And we're going to cream all that together. And we're going to scrape down the bowl. Next we add a cup of oats and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and we blend that in. Scrape the bowl. And now we're going to slowly add 2 cups of flour while the mixer's running. And lastly, we're going to put in about 3/4 of a cup of finely chopped maraschino cherries and blend them in. And that's all there is to it. That's a soft, wet dough, and we're ready to scrape the bowl and make some cookies. We've pulled the dough from the mixing bowl. This is a lightly greased sheet, and I've used a measuring spoon to measure out a 1/2 tablespoon of dough. And that gives us the target size for the little ball we're going to make with our hands. This is a wet dough, so we're going to take just a little bit of flour and flour our palms. Just a little bit to kind of dry them out. And we can pinch the dough, roll it into a ball, and it's just back and forth between your palms. And that way it doesn't stick to your palms. If you feel it starting to stick, just give yourself a little more flour. much. And these are pretty much going to hold their shape. So you can fill the sheet pretty full because they're not going to flatten out. They're not going to spread out. This sheet's ready to pop into the oven. These cookies bake in a preheated 325 degree oven for 11 to 14 minutes. You want the cookies to be a nice light brown, just starting to turn when they're done. When you take them out of the oven, they're going to seem not quite set. They're not going to be soft, but they're not going to be totally solid either. And that's what you're looking for, is this one has just started to turn. And you can feel it that it's good and solid. And again, that's about 12 to 14 minutes. And this cookie has to be set up because when we dip it in the chocolate, we're going to treat it fairly rough. We're going to be hitting it with a fork, and we don't want it breaking into crumbs when we enrobe it in the chocolate. And now it's time to enrobe our cherry cookie centers in chocolate. So we've got our double boiler thing going here. We've got a 14-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk and a teaspoon of vanilla already in the top of the double boiler. And this is one bag, or 12 ounces, of chocolate mini chips. These are semi-sweet chips, and I like to use the mini chips because they melt faster and more evenly. And we're just going to work these in here until this is smooth. And if you're doing this, this top pot, or in my case bowl, picks up the heat from the one down below. So watch it, that boy's going to get hot. And we just want to stir them until it's nice and smooth. You can see it's already melting. And what you're going to want to have ready are your cookie centers, and believe it or not, a couple of forks, because that's what we're going to use to do this with. And you just got to keep stirring this. You don't want the chocolate to set up, and you don't want it to burn in the bottom. Almost there. See that? That's nice and smooth. The last of those chips have melted. And we're ready to go. All we're going to do is take a cookie, drop it down in, use a fork to push it down, swirl the chocolate over it, reach underneath it with a fork to pick it up, and then pass it back and forth a couple times, scraping the chocolate off of it so that you don't have too much. Although some of us think there's no such thing as too much chocolate. And there you go. You've almost got something that looks like a chocolate piece of candy. Then we put it over on a wire rack that's been covered with wax paper. Set it down, and then we use a little maraschino cherry wedge as a final garnish, and push that into the soft chocolate. And then we just keep doing that. And you keep stirring the chocolate so that it doesn't set up on you. You want to make sure the cookie's completely covered before you pick it up out. And again, you just kind of transfer it back and forth a couple times. Scrape off the excess. And it's not really as hard as it looks. Set it down and give it a garnish. And if you've got a helper, having that helper take care of that garnish really makes it go a lot faster. That one got upside down. Once you've got these all enrobed, transfer your wire rack with the wax paper and the cookies to a cool, dry place. And these have to dry overnight, and you'll literally peel them off that wax paper. And if the temptation's going to be to pick them off early, and when you do that, the chocolate bottom will wind up staying on the wax paper, and you'll hate that. So the temptation is to get them and eat them, and you just got to leave them sit. And about halfway through this, your forks are probably going to be loaded up with chocolate, so you might want to have a couple extras ready. And these cookies are a big burst of chocolate when you eat them. They're excellent. The cherry center is a nice little accent. And they're really impressive in a tin or on a tray, along with the rest of the cookies that we make. And if you've got any chocoholics in your family, if you drop it, like I did, just pick it back up. As I was about to say, if you've got any chocoholics in your family or circle of friends, and you make these cookies, they're going to love you. And that's all there is to it. So I'm going to finish these up. And we've finished dipping our cherry cookies in their chocolate coating. These need now to dry overnight so we can peel them off the wax paper. And you'll need 2 batches of the dipping chocolate to cover 1 batch of cookie dough. Our cookies have dried overnight, and you can tell that they're dry and ready to peel off the wax paper. When you touch them lightly, they feel dry. There's no tackiness to them. If you get the least amount of tackiness, they're still not ready to come off. But these have been sitting for just about 12 hours overnight. And then once they're dry, all you have to do is lift them off the wax paper and they'll peel right off. And do it gently, just in case the middle of that base is a little bit damp here. You don't leave anything on the paper at all, hardly. And if you try to do this, actually that one wasn't quite dry, that was a bigger cookie. But that's what'll happen if you try to do it while they're wet. They'll all do that. And that's all there is to the chocolate covered cherry cookies. If you really want to be the hit of the party, bring a plate full of chocolate covered cherry cookies.